Welcome back. This is the podcast video for The Time Machine. This is Bookie, where we're going to be talking about The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. If you haven't seen our short synopsis video, please click this link here. And otherwise, welcome. We're back again with Dino and Jay, and I'm Dylan. And we'll be going through a number of questions about The Time Machine and really get into depth.
So people know who we are. I'm Jay.
Hello, I'm Martin.
Hello, I'm Dylan. All right, the first question is by Jay. Namely, is the time traveler a flat or a round character?
Yes. So the reason I asked this is because, so in literary terms, a flat character would be a character that at the end of the story hasn't evolved, so to say. So they're the same person at the end of the story as they were at the beginning of the story. And a round character is a character that does change as the story progresses.
Yes, so to take your example from earlier, Scrooge is a very round character.
Yes.
In that he starts off greedy and meh, and then by the end he's loving and...
Yeah, so Scrooge from A Christmas Carol would be an example of a round character, and background characters are usually flat characters in that the term comes from that they're sort of cardboard cutouts of characters.
Oh yes, I never knew.
So they're flat characters, and I'm trying to think of a main character. People argue that Holden from Catcher in the Rye is a flat character. I don't necessarily agree, but people argue that.
Anyway, the question is the time traveler a flat or a round character?
Yes.
I personally think it's a very flat character. It's he goes through all these things, he sees what happens to mankind, and a round character, I think, would have been moved by it, and at the end of the story would probably try to get his message across, like, people, we need to do this now, or we're going to turn into Morlocks.
Yeah, they would go more Scrooge McDuck. Oh,
yes.
no, not McDuck. That's wrong.
No, not the McDuck.
Not McDuck. Scrooge McDuck is a flat character.
That's a flat character.
Yeah, it's a very flat character.
So I think that the time traveler is a flat character and that he is not very much affected by what happens to him. And I happen to know that Dino disagrees on this point.
Well, I'm not sure whether he is a flat or a round character, but I am sure that he is affected by what he sees and by the events, especially by the faith of Weena, the faith of the Eloi in general.
That's true.
He finds it quite grisly, and it affects him going back into I think his own beliefs for mankind changed dramatically because he hopes to find a more...
That's true, yes. He had very different expectations, at least from what the future would be like.
Yeah.
So, if we sticking to the story here, how is he changed? How is he actually different?
Well, so that's why I'm not sure whether he's a flat or a round character, but I am sure that he's affected by what he sees.
It's cutting it a little short to say that he's not affected at all. Fair enough.
And he makes a second trip. At the end of the story, he makes a second trip. And we don't know what his intent is on that trip. Maybe his intent is to find out why this happened.
Wasn't he out to gather evidence, just to show to his mates?
Yeah, that was my read, that he just wanted to bring something. I think he wanted to bring an Eloi back to show.
Yes, but on the other hand, he didn't give those flowers away when someone asked for it, but
no, because he didn't want to. I don't know. It felt to me like he didn't want to risk like.
Yes, it's how you read into it. That's what you get with short, accessible books.
Mm-hmm.
All right. On to the next question. We've already asked if the time traveler is a flat or a round character. Another question to ask: is the time traveler an asshole?
Absolutely. This guy is a total jerk. He comes into this place. He comes in, starts yelling and dancing at people. He shoves people around. He breaks stuff. He sets a forest on fire. This is not a nice guy.
The forest fire is incidental, I think.
He makes a fire in the middle of a forest, sees it spreading, and his first thought was, "Oh, yeah, this is pretty cool." And then he runs away. That's it. That's in the book.
Well, I can at least one thing I didn't really think of him as an asshole. He might be, but the word that came to mind for me is idiot. He's such an idiot. It's like, oh no, I already spent half my matches impressing the ADD fairies.
Exactly.
And then, it's a trap, but I've got matches. And he stands there with his matches. Oh wait, I have nothing to light them with.
Oh yeah. Oh snap! This is the kind of match that needs a box. You know, like matches.
Well, he's certainly ill-prepared to journey into the future because, well, he could have landed anywhere and then maybe landed somewhere underwater or something.
Yes, maybe it would have been prudent to at least bring a toolbox and some food supplies.
And like maybe not go outside in your indoor shoes that are ill-fitting and look. This guy is not well prepared.
And maybe not for the first test go 800,000 years into the future instead of, say, 2 hours.
Yeah.
Or leave your time machine undefended. That's maybe also a problem.
One thing I also found telling is that when he lands in the future, he talks about how he wants to teach the Eloi his language. And then he's so annoyed that they don't learn his language and they can't sit still long enough. And I'm like, well, where the fuck is your effort to learn their language?
Well, he does.
He does eventually, yes.
But he's not very... He'd rather have seen it the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's not very impressed by the future mankind people.
He's very disillusioned, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. If we can continue on to the next question. Well, the time machine lands in a courtyard with a sphinx or a statue of a sphinx, and beneath the sphinx is the chamber where his time machine is dragged off to, and it takes him most of the story to get underneath the sphinx, in that cache.
You know, when the door just suddenly opens for no reason.
Yes, and it also often occurs as sort of a beacon, like to get back to the Sphinx. That's a common expression. The question is, what is the significance of the Sphinx? Why a Sphinx? It's also on the original cover, I think. At least when I'm looking at the Wikipedia picture, there's also a Sphinx. Does anyone have a good idea what it could be?
So I had to cheat. So I would prefer to hear your readings first.
All right.
I'm actually not sure. My reading of it was that the future looked very ancient-like, in a weird way, in the sense that the buildings and how the people
walk around in robes. And,
So it felt a little bit like ancient Rome, or that the future was portrayed in that sense. A sphinx is also a creature of mystery and a creature of riddles.
Yes, that's what I was going to say as well.
So maybe it has some... It is a riddle for him where his machine is. It's a riddle for him how he can open the doors. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of riddles in the story, or not riddles, but mysteries. So you have these towers and you have these wells, and he tries to find out. To find these mysteries out. So
yes, I think mystery would indeed be a way to interpret it, because I was inclined to say at first that the Sphinx symbolizes knowledge, and when everything decays and all symbols decay, but the Sphinx remains, and that could be sort of a hint toward knowledge will persist. But the story is exactly the opposite of that. A lot of actually all of science disappears. People aren't... Well, they get stupid, and they forget all these things that they used to know.
This book is basically Idiocracy from 1895, basically.
Yes, I think I remember thinking that. But well, anyway, what did you read about the Sphinx? What do people seem to agree upon?
The first thing that people say is indeed the barrier. The Sphinx indeed represents a barrier, just like in ancient times where sphinxes would be guardians or gatekeepers. And the Sphinx indeed does present a riddle to the main character, in that it's like, this thing is here. How does it work? I push the things, but nothing happens. So in that case, it is a riddle. And I've also read that people liken it to science overcoming religion, in the sense that the Sphinx traditionally is a very old religious symbol, and then we have, in this case, the time traveler who then represents science overcoming religion through his sciencey means, which I don't necessarily personally agree with, because again, he doesn't overcome the Sphinx. The Sphinx just sort of opens up, and then the thing is there.
Jay was not very pleased with the way the story developed, I believe.
So nothing happens. Anyway, I'm part of the MTV generation. I need instant gratification.
All right. Well, Dino, you weren't that far off. You were a lot closer than me.
Well, yeah, but like, let's be.
Yeah, it's all right. It's at the end of the day, it's still interpretation.
Just go like this. There we go.
If we go on to a similar question, what is the significance of the Science Museum? Or, well, the museum. They, I believe the time traveler and his Eloy weird sort of partner, Weena.
Companion.
Companion. That's a good word.
Companion, yes.
The time traveler and his companion, Weena, they leave for some reason. I'm not even sure why anymore.
They leave where? Oh, the play. Yeah, so the time traveler wanted to explore the underworld. Like
yes, yeah.
He wanted to explore, and he wanted to find out things about the.
Well, didn't he do that beforehand?
Beforehand.
Yeah,
he goes into the underworld.
The timeline here is very, because he left the Eloy behind.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, so the next thing that happens is he escapes, and then
he takes off for some reason, and he encounters a museum, or at least he already sees it in his explorations.
I think in an earlier exploration, he sees the museum.
Yeah.
He sees the green palace.
Yes.
Yeah, the green porcelain palace.
After that, he goes underground because he finds out about these Murlocs. There he's almost captured. He escapes back to the overworld. And after that, he has no ways of defending himself. So I think he went to the museum, to the Green Palace, to find more means and
for defense, and also to open the Sphinx.
Yeah.
But anyway, quite some time is spent in the museum, and quite some contemplation is done by the author about how a lot of these things, like fossils and books, all have crumbled into dust within the span of these many hundreds of thousand years. Well, the point is, if he needed fire or weapons, he could have found it anywhere, but why specifically this museum?
Well, because he couldn't have found it anywhere. I think that was the main character's point, that the fire doesn't exist anymore, which is why he spends all his matches impressing the Eloy.
Yes,
and the Eloy don't have weapons.
But I mean, there at least is some sort of significance, I think, in it being a museum, right? Or is it just, or is it really the only convenient thing he could think of?
No, I agree.
A museum is a sign of the passing of time, so it signifies that.
Yeah, well, a museum is sort of there to preserve things from ancient times, and he's gone so far that even the preservation hasn't really lasted.
Yeah, and it shows that science in the end won't last.
Yes, that could very well be. I think you make a very valid point there. We sit here in awe, but we will continue on with the next question, I think, unless you have something to say.
Well, I know my thing is sort of hooking onto this question specifically, in that if we look at the museum, or at least it's an Eloy museum, and the Eloy have sort of reached this utopia, in that they have very little, they don't need to work, they just need to live, and they can be merry, and they just eat fruit and plants. and so there's very little purpose to developing anymore, and so there's also very little purpose in remembering, because one of the things you always have with memories is that those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. So if we don't have museums that show atrocities of war, we will go to war. But if we've reached a utopia where there's literally no need for war and combat anymore, would there be a point to remembering what we needed to overcome in order to get there? Right? So in this case, the time traveler comes from a time where he hasn't reached that utopia, and so in that case, it would be like, I need these things because I'm not part of this. I'm not part of this utopia, so I need fire and I need these weapons.
He needs his old-timey...
because he's an asshole. He's a violent being. So he needs fire and he needs clubs, even though the Murloc just want to cuddle.
Yes, which ties perfectly into the next question. Are the Morlocks evil?
I wouldn't say they are. It was my question, but I myself wouldn't say they are evil. I think this is about evolution. And
Evolution.
Evolution.
All right,
Evolution. In the sense that, is a tiger evil for eating cow?
That's the thing that I wanted to address as well, and that actually has a hidden question within it. Are the Morlocks still even human, or are they just animals? How are we to regard them?
Yeah. So
because if we just see it as an animal, like a tiger, then of course it's not evil. That's just the way its evolutionary programming works. But
yeah, and this ties in with the fact it's important in the sense that in the future, so the place where the time traveler travels to, he finds out that mankind has evolved into two separate beings, namely
or at least two anyway.
Subterranean underworld Morlocks and
the Morlocks,
not Morlocks,
not flesh-eating Morlocks,
and the overworld childlike, fairy-like Eloi,
also known as the ADD fairies.
The ADD fairies.
All right,
and in this weird universe, mankind has the Eloi ate fruit, so that's that. But the underworld Morlocks, they have evolved into, or they have returned to, maybe barbarism or cannibalism, in the sense that they eat the Eloi.
Yes, but even is it even cannibalism when they're two different species?
Well, that's never really explained. Are they really two different species?
Yeah, and
how do the Morlocks breathe? How does this work?
Well, I think they would be two different species.
Are there female Morlocks?
Yeah, that's I don't know. Maybe they just pop out of the ground.
Yeah,
maybe they procreate like orcs.
Yeah,
they're just funguses.
Yeah, could be.
So I think the real question here is indeed are they still human?
Yeah.
Because if we read the book, we don't actually see the Morlock hunt Eloi.
No. It's more like cattle.
Yeah.
It's farming.
Yeah, and the what I think was telling is that there's no graveyards there's no graveyard, no catacombs.
In fact, there isn't even among the Eloi a regard for the death of their own. When Weena falls into the river and starts drowning, the other Eloi are like meh, meh.
So it's like
they don't even really care.
Yeah, I personally never regarded the Murloc as evil, and if you look at how they treat the time traveler, they only just sort of want to cuddle, and they only
well, we don't know.
Well, but they don't actually like punch him or bite him. They're just gonna go like, no, I want to touch you, and then the time traveler is an asshole, and he starts punching the Murloc and sets the forest on fire. I mean,
there's at least one thing.
When he tries to get away, they go after him. They steal his shoes.
They just wanted to show him their rock collection.
Yeah, I don't think so. I just think they want to eat him.
At least we can agree on one thing. The Morlocks are among the derpiest of antagonists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't know. I wouldn't. I personally didn't necessarily regard them as evil until the time travelers started being a jerk to them.
But then, at the same time, can we consider the Eloi are considered more human-like in the sense that they have a language?
It's a bit hypocritical in a way, but the writer and the character admit that they view the Eloi as more human than the Morlock when they're probably about the same degree.
Yeah.
But I guess I used to sort of agree on that until a few minutes ago when I mentioned their disregard of each other. Mm-hmm. Like even elephants, they grieve for many years when one of their own passes away, and they've sort of...
Yeah, and like dogs do as well.
Yeah,
and
so
cats do.
In that sense, they've degenerated further than that, if we may call it degeneration. I mean, that's sort of... anthropocentric, is it a word?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is now.
All right. Anthropocentric, you heard it here, guys. But,
Hashtag enriching the language.
I've been heavily interrupting you.
I've forgotten where I was going with
if the Eloi were still even human.
Yeah. Because they have a language. And then, at the same time... I think it's mentioned that the Morlocks also have kind of a language.
Yes, well, the Morlocks talk with each other.
Yeah.
But because we're dealing with an unreliable narrator, we don't know if it's very different, like from the Eloi language.
Well, it probably is. I mean.
Well, I mean, but if we look at like language markers.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, if these two species, if we may call them that. Have been separated for so long that even their physiology has changed, then their language probably has as well.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just arguing that we don't know anything about the language, so we don't know if one language is more developed than the other.
Fair enough.
And at the same time, you call them the derpiest of villains. That's true. But then at the same time, we should call the Eloi the derpiest of, well, not villains, but
Eloi.
The most willing of victims.
The most willing of victims. Well, they are afraid of the dark and they are afraid of the Morlocks, but then they just gather around in packs and let the Morlocks touch them and take them away, probably.
The Morlocks just want to cuddle, man. They're just very loving.
They want to cuddle with your teeth.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Continuing on with a question about language. Wait, where did I have it? What effect does the language used have on the story? Personally, I was actually surprised because the novel is 1890 something?
1895.
1895. It's still very, very easy to read in our modern times, I think.
Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm. I'd expected it to be more archaic and hard to get into, but I thought it was pretty easy to read, to get into. But I'm sure that you have an opinion on it, Jay, because it's your question.
What in this case, the language used, I'm trying to aim more on the fact that we have the narrator talk in a certain way. So it's all told from one perspective. We don't hear him describe dialogue. It's just this report, basically. So what effect does this have on the story? The fact that the entire story is just a report, basically. Because the language itself, it's not very...
I think it's it reminds me of the question that I was just writing down regarding why the time traveler is never called by name. I think it may be a sort of mechanism for the author to avoid having to give explanations for everything. Mm-hmm. If it was more of an omnipotent narrator, then... well, there'd be like, this and this and this, and that happened because so many thousand years ago, this and that and that. And he doesn't have to do these things when it's all just a report, a report told by some guy who went there and saw some things. And I get the idea that H.G. Wells likes to avoid explanations for a lot of things. So
Yeah, I agree, but I liked the fact that he didn't feel obligated to bog down his story with like a very long explanation on how the fourth dimension and how his theory of time travel worked.
Well, that was interesting because it's never mentioned how the time machine actually travels through time.
yes, it uses quartz, man. It uses quartz.
Yeah. You have a lever, and if you pull the
and it's-
lever, then you go through time. But it never.
There's totally ivory in the thing as well.
Yeah, there's
and
ivory and copper.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Maybe things will explode. Oh no, wait. I guess they don't. All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Exactly, which I liked. I liked the fact that he didn't feel obligated
Yeah.
to explain himself too much.
And both the narrator, the main narrator, the I person, as well as the time traveler, they don't get names.
But nobody really does.
No, well, you have Philby.
Yeah, like the present time cast.
Yeah, the person you have Philby.
Yes, that's
Yes.
true. Philby, the true star of the story.
That's the only person actually with a name.
It's I almost read it like here we have this guy.
Yeah.
Fucking Philby.
Kobe. He still owes me $2.
Which were £2, which was
and
incredible
there-
in that time.
And there was actually in the second time we had another cast of characters, and then there were a couple of them who got a name, I think. But there was also the Silent Man, who was during the whole evening didn't say a word. And
Yeah,
was
there was-
very awkward.
there was only one sentence about
Yeah,
it, I think.
yeah, and I-
like, oh yeah, that guy was there.
And he totally was there. Steve was here as well.
And I was thinking, is this?
He insisted on being in the
Yeah.
story, so I put Steve in as the silent man.
Kickstarters. Yeah.
Is this is this Silent Man? Is it actually the time traveler who? You see, in a way, you have I thought there would be more of paradox because time traveling stories always end up in paradoxes.
Well, I mean, this is one of the first
Yeah.
time travel stories, so I guess they didn't have to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, he
Just
didn't
yet.
have to kill his grandpa. So,
I saw
but
this.
that's
movie
also always when you go back in time.
Yeah, in this case they went forward,
Yeah,
Yes.
which does bring us its own host of paradoxes, but like different ones.
Yeah.
I think.
And I'm especially glad that they didn't go into that sort of thing.
One other thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to language is that the way the time traveler describes things in the future, how reliable is his description? Because the reason I'm asking is that if we go to the future, like a million billion gajillion years, and we see things that we've never seen before,
Then how would you even?
how would
yeah.
we explain this? Can we rely on the fact that the Sphinx is actually a Sphinx, for example?
Yes, yeah, I think he mentions it himself that that his view and his way of interpreting the future is probably limited by our current time. In the same way that if you brought a savage to New York,
Not just a savage, a savage, very specific word for a person.
I was hoping to avoid that one. I need to work on my tiptoeing.
Yeah.
But, anyway, a savage would be brought to New York and then brought back to Africa, and he had to tell what he saw. Then he wouldn't have
The vocabulary.
yes, and also the insight to explain.
Yeah, in the same way that if you didn't know the word orange, you would just use the word red or yellow. Hi, we have a guest. She's here.
Hello, welcome. Is the right one not being too loud? Sorry,
Oh no, that's fine.
Okay.
No,
Excellent.
the library
Okay.
just opened, so it's okay.
Oh,
okay, yeah.
We've got a reading club at 1 o'clock.
Yeah,
Right.
klopt. Het is
Oh,
nu...
no, that's fine.
it is 1:45. So we're gonna be snappy.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
All right. We've just heard that our time is running short, more or less. We have at most 15 minutes. So,
I think we should discuss the class because that's the socialist critique in the book.
Yes,
I think
so
that's the most interesting.
Is this a good commercial for communism?
Oh, I'm not sure. In the beginning of the story, you think in a way because he got his trip to the future goes in stages. First, he thinks
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yeah.
For people who haven't read the book, one of the ideas that is discussed is that the Eloi evolved from the upper class of society, like they never had to work and they could just enjoy themselves, and the Morlocks supposedly evolved from the working class who were driven underground because, in the time when the book was written, some cities would have cheap housing and cheap workplaces underground, and then that sort of in this novel takes on a more dramatic form wherein the working class spends all of their life underground and eventually evolve into a creature that can't stand light.
Although they are very efficient at industrialization. They do put that in the book as well.
Yes, they still work their machines and supply the Eloi with clothes and other such things. Anyway.
Yeah, so his trip, it has a couple of stages he mentions. At first, he thinks man conquered nature. It's a utopia. People...
We can just eat fruit.
We can just eat fruit. There's no...
conflict.
People play the Eloi are playing all day. There's no toil. There's no trouble.
There's no conflict. Jay really likes that about the book. There's no conflict.
Yes, it's my best. It's my biggest.
Then tension is brought again because there is fear. The Eloi are afraid of the Morlocks, and so he starts to think. Well, there are two races, and the Morlocks, they provide the Eloi with their food and clothes, and they are fine with that. And society has. So it's still a little bit of a utopia, but then utopia, man did not only conquer nature, but also conquered his other man, his fellow man. So half the population was driven down, and then in the end he finds out, oh wait, the laborers, the former laborers, they are now the masters because they use the former upper class now as a kind of cattle.
Yes,
and that's the dystopian turn of the story, I thought. Mm-hmm. So that's the phasing of the story. So from man conquered nature to man conquered nature and fellow man to man
took it back.
Fellow man eats man.
Yes.
Yes. I can see why people would see it as a discussion on communism, but I also think that no, that's not entirely true. I was going to say I think that it's also just the time in which this book was discussed a lot. I think it was it had a lot of scholarly interest in the 1960s when communism was a hot topic. But on the other hand, as Jay mentioned, sometimes in the book it's just like blah 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 communism. So
there's like 2 or 3 like one-word sentences, and it's always blah blah blah. This thing is happening. Communism.
So yes, I guess it does sort of ask to be
interpreted
in that way. Yes. I'm afraid I don't have a very solid opinion on it.
It wouldn't be a critique on the communistic system because that system didn't exist in 1895.
It's a critique on.
It's a critique on capitalism. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. So if it was intended as such, I guess, because the fact that you have a very strict separation between an upper class and a lower class, and the lower class is the working class, as they are described as who they toil with industry. I mean, it does lend itself very well to that interpretation. Mm-hmm. So,
all right. With your permission, I will be moving on to the last question.
Permission granted.
This is an important one. It's sadly more important than the other one I wanted to ask. I wanted to discuss how the 17 sequels written by other people, how that relates to modern day fan fiction.
Total fan fiction.
We don't have time for that. Instead, I'll be asking you the one big question. Which of the things discussed in this book do you see happening, actually?
Oh, that's an easy one. Or may I go first? Yeah. Well, it's an easy one. When he travels, the Earth becomes warmer. When he's in the future, and when he's even farther in the future, the sun becomes bigger.
Yes.
And that will actually happen because the sun will burn more of its water power.
Yes.
And it becomes helium. Helium, is that English?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then, so that will happen, and eventually our own Earth will stop spinning because the magma in the core will stop being molten. It will cool down. So those things will actually happen.
Yes. But to put it more in sort of terms like, will we actually see things like human life becoming so comfortable that we're going to be dumbed down by it because we have no stimulations anymore?
According to Idiocracy, yes.
Yeah, but Idiocracy, it comes from another angle at it. But
I don't know.
That would mean that we would have less toil or trouble in our day, and I think that hasn't happened.
We as a species are very good at making trouble for ourselves.
That's what I was going to say. I think that by the time we become comfortable, there's going to be douchebags somewhere who get bored and
they're like, nah, man, I want your cybernetic laser beach ball.
Yes, and then wars, and then at some point, war is over and humans is over.
I think something very telling about human psychology is that if we were given $100 bills, we would be complaining about how they are folded.
Yes. So.
So what I do see happening about the book, which is just literally inevitable, is the fact that human life and human dominance is going to stop, and our regards of history, and we will be lost to the annals of history. There's no way around it. There will come another dominant species, and I don't know if it's going to be human-like in the sense that they're going to be cognitively exploring.
Or maybe dinosaurs come back, or maybe it's going to be Morlocks, not Morlocks.
Fleshy Morlocks.
I don't think we as a species will evolve. I can't see that happening. Because we
rather devolve or stay the same?
No. I think as species or genetically we will stay the same, unless there is some there will be more process of natural selection.
Well, they did carry out this experiment, I think, some years ago with fruit flies. They took fruit flies into space, and in space there's no gravity, so at a certain point the fruit flies realized they didn't use their wings anymore to fly, and so after a few generations they just stopped growing wings. I mean, fruit flies. They used fruit flies because they just procreate and change far more quickly. But I do see it happening that the human species will become less muscular.
Yeah, because we're more adept at sitting behind desks now.
Yes,
and there's also the thing of just because our diet is changing. I think our teeth and our internal system is going to change.
Yes. Maybe we will become taller.
We'll be more adept at processing high fructose corn syrup.
It appears that a number of old ladies who want to use the room at 1 o'clock are starting to become angry. So we're going to leave it off at that. Hopefully we'll see you next month. Maybe we'll have different teeth and less muscles.
Hopefully we'll not be eaten by the Morlocks.
Maybe we will be Morlocks.
Or by the old ladies.
At the end of this month, we'll be discussing Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. It's very short and it's pretty good, so make sure to read it before then, because we will be spoiling the heck out of it. This was Bookie. Thank you so very, very much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you next time.